I'm Sylvia. I'm a single mother to 2 children. I've been in drug addiction for the past 13 years of my life. Being brought up, I was brought up in a Christian home. In fact, my grandfather was the first Archbishop in Africa. I knew the Christian principles and values. I went to good schools. My parents provided well financially. Though emotionally, I always felt empty. By the time I was 8 years old, my mom took me to boarding school. My parents did that. And when I was in boarding school, I realized I had self-esteem issues concerning my height and my physical appearance. This only made me want to work hard in education and do well in sports, which I did quite well, and it earned me posts like being a head girl and positions while in school, which earned me comfort at that time. While I was at home during holidays, I'd still experiment and try alcohol from the minibar at home. And by the time I finished my primary education, I joined a British curriculum school for my O-levels. And during O-levels, I really wanted to fit in. I felt I needed to belong to a certain clique of people. And that made me choose the popular girls. I really wanted to be popular, and being popular came with a price. It meant you should be at least promiscuous, that you should have tried most, if not all, drugs that were available. So I started to use cigarettes as well. I started to smoke marijuana. I was drinking alcohol, now heavily. And eventually I was using other drugs that my parents were not able to find out about. I didn't do so well in my O-levels, concerning the fact that most of the time I'd be out clubbing with my friends instead of being in school. And I did a lot of things in secret that my family were not able or never able to find out. Now this gave me a form of guilt and shame, and it only made me isolate from my family. So by the time I was joining university, I happened to do till 3rd year, being marked at the register, passing my exams, but never in class. In 3rd year, when my dad passed away, that came as a really big blow to me. And I only felt I didn't want to live anymore. I joined my mom in business, and while I was on a business spree in Malindi, of course away from home, as you know, I was isolating, I happened to become goods worth a lot of money. For me, I didn't know how to come to terms with that. I felt like I was a loser. I felt like I was not worthy anymore. So I simply detached myself from the family. That means I switched off my phone line. No one was able to contact me, and it was just me and me alone. So I basically ran away from home, and most of the time I was hopping from one friend to another. Now this made me feel like I needed someone else to love me because my father wasn't there anymore. So when I came back to Nairobi, I came back with the man I was convinced I was in love with, and that happens to be the father of my 2 children. And the area where we were living was just more community-like. There was this community spirit that was happening there from the uptown place that I was living to the ghetto where we had moved into. I just felt more belonging there, and he introduced me with his friends to heroin and cocaine as well. Initially it was just trying, testing, and soon after it followed me going looking for these drugs from where they're sold. Eventually hooked, totally hooked. So I would just use to live, and I lived to use. The relationship became bumpy, and sooner or later we had separated. I dumped my children with my mother at home, and I was just living a me alone life. So I opted to join another group of people who would have accepted me, and that happened to be street children. So I decided to live on the streets of Nairobi. Now, living in the streets of Nairobi, that only happened after my family had tried on 5 separate occasions to take me to rehab. But because I was still in denial and I didn't want to change, I'd always come back out of rehab and back into the drugs. But when I was in prison, I'd also not use for the time that I was there. And when I came out, I'd still run back to the drugs. So while I was on the streets and I was all alone, I opted to stealing. I opted to selling my body to get money. I opted into begging family members and strangers for money just to sustain my drug use. This brought down my family reputation very. It made me seclude myself even more from my family. So I was now a lost child, all alone in the streets of Nairobi, no one to run to and nobody to look up to. And that is when, after looking around on the street, I found that many of my friends whom I would go out to steal with were dying, either getting shot or dying from mob justice. I escaped mob justice by the grace of God severally. And some would just get overdosed in the streets. Others would be paralyzed because of experiencing a lot of violence while on the street. Some would opt to take poison. And for me, this really got me scared. And around 2016, in November, at that point, I'd reached rock bottom. I decided to join a street children support group, which was just a walking distance from town where I would put a curtain down to sleep. Every day I'd go there, the reason being they'd give me 1 bucket of water to take a bath, they'd give me a little bar of soap and a plate of food. That was guaranteed. And as much as they would educate me about the drugs, I was still on the waiting list to be enrolled into methadone program. And because there was no supply for this methadone, I was forced to self-medicate. I was so angry with myself for getting myself where I was. Already I was getting the street children having enough of me on the streets and telling me, go back home, you have a good home. Why are you staying here with us? We don't have other opportunities, you do, go away, go away. And now that made me even reject myself. I was angry. At this point, I decided to fast for 10 days. In the process, it got me mentally unstable. And around 2016, October, to be precise, on the 26th day of October, I was caught in the newspapers. I happened to create a fracas outside the Parliament building. And the following day, when other street people who were coming to the program, when they had the paper in their hand and they were concerned that something was definitely wrong because they had seen me the day before preaching in the streets of Nairobi, they were concerned and they decided to coincide with the officer in charge to take me to Valerie Mental Hospital. I arrived at the Valerie Mental Hospital and I stayed there for 1.5 months where I was put under medication. And by the time I was well and able to go home, the doctor had to discharge me. The social worker was taking care of the expenses while I was there at the mental home. And now, when they asked me to go home, I just bluntly said no. Reason being, home was the street for me. When they asked me for my ID, on looking at the back of my ID, the doctor was pretty shocked and asked me if I came from a certain home that he knew. And he made it very clear to me that he was my uncle. That was God's divine connection. He happened to call my cousin, who brought me to Teen Challenge.
In 2016, towards the end of the year, Sylvia was taken in to Valerie. her drug abuse had got to the point where they felt she needed to go into Mathare because she was, shall I put it this way, she was losing it. And so she was interned, and they managed to dry her up and stabilize her. And Mathare does not keep you forever. It's a public institution, it's got to be funded. She had declared that she doesn't have family, she had declared that she lives on the streets, and Mathare, in their responsibility and by their procedures, do not release you back to the streets. They look at your ID and they send you back home. And the way this works is that they look at your ID, they find a member of staff who comes from the area or close enough to the area where you come from, and they hand you over to that member of staff and they send you home. That member of staff obviously gets a trip home on taxpayer money, but I think it's all very good, it works very well. And so that person deposits you home, and you are now in the hands of your people, and they can leave you there. And so it was set that Sylvia would be sent home, and her papers were therefore handed to a clinical officer at Mathare by the name Ouma. Now, here's where God comes in. Ouma is my paternal uncle. He does work at Mathare. Sylvia is a maternal cousin. The two of them don't really know one another. But Uncle Fanuel figured out that he's heard this name before. And so he called me that day and he told me, "Do you know Sylvia Owino?" I said, "I think so. If it's the one you're talking about, she's my cousin." And he said, "We have her here with us at Mathare. If you could advise us, what should we do? I'm supposed to take her home." And I said to my uncle, "Let me come tomorrow and see," which is what I did. And so when I showed up to see Sylvia at Mathare, she saw me at the gate. They were closed in, and she shouts out my name. She was obviously quite happy to see family. But here's the thing, she had told them she has no family. And so she takes me to the matron, and the matron says, "Are you really a cousin?" I think she became suspicious that Sylvia was trying to get out of there with a man. And I said, "Yes, I am." And I showed my ID, and it so happens that her surname, Owino, is the same as my surname. Now again is a God thing, that was coincidence. Because I'm not related to her father, I'm related to her mother. And my father and her father have no relation, but they have the same name. And so the matron believed and asked her, "You told us you have no family." And she said, "Yes, but that's because I don't think family want me back. I don't think family would receive me." And so the matron said, "And what about him?" And she says, "Well, he's here." And I said, "Yes, I want to see what I can do for him." And so I asked them to keep her there and not send her home, because I think home would be, she would find her way back into Nairobi and onto the streets. And I came back the next day. I put this to prayer and asked God to just receive her, take care of her, and that to guide me, just give me wisdom. And so the next day when I showed up, she told me that she was going to be put on a program that would wean her off her addiction. And that the officer in charge of the program wanted to see me. So I went and saw the officer in charge, I think his name is Joshua. And Joshua said, "I don't want to put on this program, it's a methadone. I don't want to put on this program because this program perpetuates the habit of being dependent on something every day." And so when I saw him, he said, "Look, the best bet for you is to find her somewhere where she can get help." And I said, "I have no idea. Where do I start?" And he gave me two names, just two. Teen Challenge and a Dr. Ouma, I think it was, who is in Langata or Karen. And so I told Sylvia, "I'll leave you here for a while. Let me go and check these two places." And she says, Teen Challenge had been here to the center, to Mathare, and they talked to us about how it works. Anyway, so I did do my research, and lo and behold, some 6 years before this, I had read the book, The Cross and the Switchblade, I think it series, The Cross and the Switchblade, and it talked about addiction and helping people off the street. And so I remember that, and I thought, God, are you showing us something, leading us something? And so my mind was made up that we would try Teen Challenge. What I did is I visited Teen Challenge and just talked to them, and they said that the way they work, the way they help people out of their addiction is through Christ. Now, I'm a believer, and I love God, and I believe God is able. God can do all things, and God loves us. And so my mind was made up. I spoke with her mom, sought to just have her admitted to Teen Challenge.
Now, coming to Teen Challenge was another step for me, having to live away from all drugs, including the psychic drugs. The following day, I was able to take a step of faith and let go of those drugs. Through God's favor, through God's strength, I received divine healing. And 10 days after being in Teen Challenge, I was able to give my life to Christ. Teen Challenge is not necessarily a rehabilitation program. It's actually a Christian discipleship program. It's a 1-year discipleship program. It's actually a faith-based solution for the drug epidemic. And their concept just happened to strike me more than several other rehabs. Their one step of Jesus Christ really made it easier for me. And the moment I was able to carry my oppressions to Jesus, the moment I was able to realize that I actually have a sin problem going within me, that I was so unforgiving, that I was so angry with God and myself and others, that I was so resentful, as well as having shame and guilt. I realized that I hadn't been able to deal with loss and grief of my father, of the goods that I lost. I realized that I had to get out of that toxic relationship that I was in for 13 years. That's when I was able to come into contact with Christ's deliverance. I was able to come to peace with being in my own skin. I was able to come to a point of self-awareness. I came to understand who I am, and I was able to have some self-worthiness, not on material things, but to be able to appreciate myself for who I am according to God. I was able to use the Bible as the manual of my life, and from then I've been able to restore back so much that I'd lost from the evil one. I thank God for restitution that's still happening within my family. I bless God that I'm able to know and be with my children. Currently, I am volunteering at Teen Challenge. It's been an awesome experience. The fact that I'm able to give back what I got, the fact that I'm able to encourage girls from the level at where I was, that to be able to tell them that this is possible with God and through God. I am also privileged to be joining in ministry. I've been going out to street missions, being able to reach out to those that are unreachable. I remember a certain incident when I was still dirty and a street girl. I'd go to a church and no one would want me in the church. In fact, I'd be stopped at the door. And that really touched me. And that's the reason why right now I go to the unreachable areas to tell those in the street that Jesus does love them and that there is change through God. And for that, I am just grateful for the opportunity that Teen Challenge is giving me. I know prospects are high. I am blessing God for the patience He's giving me. I'm blessing God for each day He's being able to bless. I blessed Teen Challenge for the opportunity that I had, that when I came, as much as I was so unlovable, that nobody wanted to be near me, nobody wanted to listen to even what I had to say, that the staff members were so welcoming. They'd give me a hug and say, "We love you." And that to me was just a picture of God in man. And without their love, without me feeling accepted by them, I wouldn't be here today. So I just give all credit to God first, I give all credit to his connections of my cousin being able to get me from the mental home here. I bless God for Teen Challenge being able to walk with me.
I had taken a picture of her on the day we admitted her to the center. And when I came, I think it was 6 weeks into the program, the difference was like night and day. And so we said we must take a picture again. So we've got pictures to share of when she came in. And I'll be honest, I don't think she's heard me say this, but when I brought her in, she looked like a boy. 6 weeks later, she looked like the beautiful girl, lady we'd always known. And we had every reason to praise God. We had confidence that God was the one who was working a miracle in her life.
Being able to grow from that place that God has placed me, being able to learn, being able to listen and talk less, being able to be mentored by women of God, being able to get preached to by powerful men and women of God. At Teen Challenge, the program is totally different. One, because we get to be marinated into the Word of God daily, and that for me really worked on me because my relationship with God became intimate. I began to be sensitive to God's voice. I began to depend less on my own thoughts. And I began to realize, yes, indeed, God is a limitless God.
We thank the Lord for a wonderful miracle He has done in her life, for what He is doing in her life, and for the fact that right now she's been called back to Teen Challenge and is serving by trying to help others. And it's just so fulfilling to see her life so totally transformed by the experience with God, by connecting with God, and by just knowing God.